I think the pandemic caused people to reevaluate who was in charge of their state governments more than any other event in my lifetime. And you had to make a decision about how you were going to handle that. Were you, as the governor, going to look at everything, consume the data yourself, be mindful of your state's economic well-being, the education of your kids, yes, health in terms of COVID, but also health in terms of every other thing? Or were you going to basically subcontract out your leadership to health bureaucrats like Dr. Fauci? Well, in Florida, we were mindful of President Eisenhower warning in his farewell address about the dangers of allowing a scientific, technological elite to get a hold of public policy, because Eisenhower observed they don't see the full picture. They are focused on one narrow aspect, and so you consult with that, but a statesman's got to harmonize all the different competing interests in society. Fauci doesn't know anything about the economy. He doesn't know anything about education. He doesn't know anything about your rights. Indeed, he doesn't care about your rights. And so when the world went mad, when common sense suddenly became an uncommon virtue, Florida stood as a refuge of sanity, a citadel of freedom for people throughout the United States and indeed throughout the world. We refused to let our state descend into some type of Faucian dystopia where people's rights were curtailed and their livelihoods were destroyed. We made sure people had a right to work, and we got people back to work and businesses back open. We made sure that every school in the state of Florida in that 2020 school year was open because people needed to be in school. And I can tell you, we had families move from the Pacific Coast just for the fact that we had schools open in Florida when you didn't have them in many other states. We understood that the elite, the medical elite, whatever their intentions were originally, I don't know, but this devolved into something that became very political. And they wanted to use government to control your behavior. So we rejected the imposition of a biomedical security state in the state of Florida. We empowered people to make their own choices. And so we did things like ban vaccine passports in the state of Florida. Some states said, you want to go stay in a hotel, go to a restaurant, you got to cough up your vax papers on these mRNA shots. And we said that's none of their business. Everyone has a right to participate in society. That's a personal choice that you make, whether to take that or not. And we're not going to let you be excluded. Now, what ended up happening because we did that, one of the things that ended up happening was 2021, Florida set a record for domestic tourism. If you compare the change in tourism in California from 2019 to 2021, California tourism declined by 22%. If you compare 2019 to 2021 for New York City's tourism declined 43%. In the year 2021, if you look at all foreign tourism to the United States as a whole, Florida accounted for almost 45% of our nation's total tourism from foreign countries. So people knew if you're going to spend your hard-earned money and you want to go on vacation, you actually want to be on vacation. You don't want to get hit up for medical papers or told you have to wear a mask or do all these other things. They knew they could come to Florida and they knew they'd be free. And this is not just something that we beat our chest about because we're more free. This had a direct impact on the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of people who work in our tourism and hospitality industry. It boomed like never before, and people were better off as a result of the decisions that we made. We also understood that this being a personal decision with respect to these shots, nobody in the state of Florida was going to be put to have to choose between a job they needed and a shot they didn't want to take. We protected all of our employees from the mandates. And I can cite you statistics about how we performed during COVID. One of the ones I think is most significant, because clearly the economic and all that education, we did so much better. But if you look since COVID, and every state saw an increase in excess mortality. Unfortunately, that's what happens in a pandemic. Florida had less increase in excess mortality than both New York and California. So all the mandates, all those other things, Florida had less of an increase. And you know how I know that Florida did it right? Because a lot of these lockdown politicians and people that would go on cable news and criticize Florida, the first chance they got to escape the policies they were advocating, they'd end up down in Florida just living the dream.